An unfathomable world. A world we know exists, but nobody wants to get to know.
The men incarcerated here are extremely dangerous.
Those are chopping up heads and everything.
Total anarchy.
Another inmate attacked me. He stabbed my eye.
The more corrupt, the better for me.
Behind bars is a struggle just to survive.
I won't hurt anybody else. I just hurt myself.
And only the strongest will survive.
I keep on fighting to get out of here for them.
Their lives are always in somebody else's hands.
Pretty much caged animals. They'll lock you up and throw away the key.
Behind bars. In the toughest prisons in the world. Armenia, a country with a painful past and a present in constant flux, shaped by former Soviet influence and branded by the catastrophic economic consequences of that influence. The majority of the population lives in abject poverty. Across from them stand powerful elites with links to organized crime and a swamp of corruption. Armenia has one of the strictest penal systems in the world. Even for minor crimes, a person can spend years behind bars. When your luck has truly run out, you end up here, in the Armavir Penitentiary, a prison that was built specifically to break the decades-old gangster culture referred to as thieves in law. In other words, criminals who live by their own laws.
They don't want to be seen themselves, but they're watching us, always trying to control everything.
The government seeks to protect its people from the gangsters at all costs.
I have the right to shoot without previous warning.
The criminals that are doing time in here
I don't have any problems. I'm cool with everyone here. Everything's fine.
should be kept in here as long as possible.
8 years I was only in a single cell, never came out to see the sky.
The gangsters do come in contact with prison guards, who are totally overwhelmed and corrupt.
Unfortunately, we have to admit that there are guards here who would smuggle anything for money.
Being better than the normal of Armenia, that kind of a correction is unthinkable.
The Armavir Penitentiary, Armenia's declaration of war on gangster culture. 8 o'clock in the morning, the prison guards begin their shift.
Morning.
The prison is the daily workplace for correctional officers Aram Havanesyan and Arman Beglayan. Their daily rounds in the cell block lead through a closely guarded passageway. All employees and visitors must go through here. It's the only way into the prison and the only way out. The guards register every single person who passes through. Cell phones and IDs, everything has to be handed over here. What is truly surprising, though, is that it's the last place in the cell block that is actually armed. In the Armavir Penitentiary, all guards work without weapons. No sticks, no pepper spray, not even handcuffs.
In Armenia, there's no official regulation about whether we have to carry clubs or handcuffs or anything at all. We do have all of these things, but we don't use them. We believe it only provokes the inmates and makes them more aggressive. They start acting out, banging against the cell doors, and it definitely leads to faster uprisings.
The guards in this prison believe in a non-violent concept, at least as long as the inmates behave well.
Of course, there have been incidents where we were attacked. If prisoners become violent, We separate them from the group. We take them immediately out of the block and put them in solitary confinement. If it becomes necessary, that is where we might use a club.
Inside Armenia's most modern detention facility, de-escalation is the order of the day. Outside, 2 walls and a security fence make the prison into a fortress. Half a dozen watchtowers encircle the grounds, so that nothing and nobody gets out of here. Unlike the prison guards, the security guards are heavily armed. Their standard weapon is the Kalashnikov AK-47. Security guard Zazun Razayan has to stay highly alert, whether it's 40 degrees Celsius in summer or freezing in winter, because carrying a gun comes with huge responsibility.
If there's an escape attempt, I have the right to shoot without previous warning.
The reason for these drastic security measures can be traced back to Armavir's Block 6. This is where you will find the country's most notorious gangsters. Men who live by their own rules, even as prisoners. Someone who knows these men very well is prison psychologist Georg Avangyan.
This is Block 6. There are all kinds of different felons living in here. But the most interesting thing about them is that they live by a code of honor. They call it thieves in law. These men reject any kind of state authority and have their own laws.
The thieves in law are members of the Armenian mafia. Outside the walls, they rule the Armenian underground. Even in prison, they are very powerful.
If we took one of these prisoners out of here and isolated him from the group, he'd consider it an attack on his life. And he'd do anything he could to get back to the group. He is prepared to do anything and would stop at nothing, not even an act of violence.
The psychologist is one of the few people of authority who are accepted by the inmates in Block 6.
It's not just us watching them the whole time. They're also watching us. They always want to know what's going on at any moment.
The real bosses, however, remain in the background. They have their own ears and eyes, the ones they call watchers, who are their link to the outside world.
If prisoners have committed themselves to this code amongst criminals, such as the thieves in law have done here in Block 6, then the leaders and their henchmen can exert incredible power over the others.
If there are any problems, the prison administration addresses them directly by talking to the spokesperson from the cell block. Neither side wants any trouble. The silent deal between the mafia and the guards is, we don't interfere in any of your business, and you as inmates yourselves, make sure Block 6 stays quiet. Gago Galestyan is one of the spokesmen. The prison psychologist chats regularly with him to get a feeling for the current mood.
In my opinion, no one can ever be completely sure. They'll never end up in prison one day.
Being housed in Block 6 is basically a privilege for him.
Here in our block, it's important to stick together. We protect and support each other. No one from the outside is allowed to interfere. That's why there are only Armenians in Block 6. In a crisis, we Armenians stick together. That's what's special about the Armenian people.
The mafia sticks together. Like a lot of others in Block 6, Gago is doing time for drug trafficking. He was caught with half a kilo of heroin. That's a felony in Armenia. At the same time, it's the main source of income for the Armenian mafia. This particular subculture originated in the time of Stalin's prison camps. When Armenia was a Soviet republic, the mafia dramatically expanded its power throughout the prison. It controls the fate of each and every prisoner. Part of their code is, don't speak to anyone related to the government. As the Soviet Union disintegrated, the influence of this criminal organization grew. The Armavir Penitentiary is the first attempt to limit the power of the thieves-in-law and to protect other prisoners from them. One of the ways to achieve this was to divide the facility into cell blocks. This allowed some of the prisoners who do not follow the criminal code to be separated from the mafia members. Block 4 is mainly occupied by small-time criminals. Block 5 is reserved for former civil servants, such as corrupt officials or police officers. The felons are in Blocks 1 through 3 and in Block 6. These are the violent offenders, drug dealers, and those involved in organized crime. This is where the thieves-in-law are in charge. Inmates here live by their own rules. Protecting the other prisoners in the Armavir Penitentiary. That is one of the duties of Arman and Aram and their 100 colleagues.
Attention. Today, you have to be careful. When you're searching the cells today, look out for any cutting and stabbing weapons.
For Aman and Aram, every shift begins with a briefing from their commander, Khachik Harotsyunan. They are given information that also includes details important to their own safety.
Right face. Go to work.
Now they have been made aware of any incidents that might have occurred and which prisoners are potentially troublesome. Block 4 is having its weekly cell inspection today. It's one of the 2 blocks whose inmates have not submitted to the code of thieves-in-law.
Guards and inmates all accounted for. No incidents.
At the same time, the task is not without its dangers. Guards have to be prepared for resistance or even an attack at any time. It is therefore important to have a very specifically organized search process.
The best time for searches is in the morning when everyone's in their cell. Let's go.
In a group of 5, the prison officers examine every cell. Between 2 and 4 prisoners live in the 8-square-meter cells. Every cell is furnished differently. Only beds and bathroom facilities are provided. The rest has to be provided by the inmates themselves, from furniture to tableware to cleaning products. Glass, ceramic dishes, and metal cutlery are forbidden. But of course, the inmates periodically attempt to smuggle things in. The most important part of the search, Arman uses a rubber mallet to search for signs of escape attempts and for obscured hiding places.
It happens a lot that inmates make holes in the walls to hide things and then fill them up with sand and wax.
But they don't just examine the cells.
During the shift change, we also look at the prisoners themselves to see if they're in good shape or if they look sick or exhibit any signs of abuse. It could happen that someone has done something to himself during the night or that another inmate has done something to him.
48 cells, 1 minute for each inspection. The guards also keep an eye on the food. It could contain homemade alcohol or drugs. During a search, the prisoner is always present to make sure the guards don't plant anything. In cell 405, the guards encounter inmates who are nervous. And in fact, they do find something here. While searching the cell, they discover a metal fork, a piece of sandpaper, and a self-made immersion heater. All forbidden objects.
In particular, the fork and the homemade immersion heater are extremely dangerous. The metal fork could be used as a weapon. We pulled this immersion heater out of circulation.
Simply because these kinds of homemade things can be deadly.
Unfortunately, we find stuff like this all the time.
They use sandpaper to finish off the hiding place in the wall.
Aram suspects that the objects have been stolen from the workshop or from one of the tradesmen. Investigation proceedings will now be conducted. In the worst case, the inmates could face solitary confinement. Those who have been caught before are subjected to more frequent inspections from the guards. Warden Aram checks the delivery that one of the prisoners received today from his family. A few days ago, Georg Avangyan was caught with a forbidden cell phone. Since then, he has been under close observation. This time, Aram didn't find a phone, but between the piles of clothes and objects, he comes across other things that are forbidden in the cells of Armavir.
A regular plastic bowl like this is no problem. It can't do any harm. But these ceramic dishes are an absolute no-go. A weapon could be made from broken pieces.
Besides the ceramic dishes, Aram also takes out a sharp knife and a metal fork.
Now this goes back.
Can't I take this now?
Of course not.
During the inspection, the prisoner's mother has to wait in an adjacent room. That's because she's the one who put the forbidden items in the package.
This goes back. If we really had something against him personally, we'd be even tougher on it. All we're doing is we're doing our jobs. We're doing what we have to do.
You're always putting him at a disadvantage.
According to your list, you assured us that you would take the china and cutlery back, but you did not do so. I'm reminding you again that you are in violation of prison rules.
Today, Georg's family gets off with a warning.
I can't say that families are just naive and don't know what is allowed and what is not allowed into the prison. They take advantage of the situation that there aren't enough guards to carry out these checks on a consistent basis. The three of us who are on duty now have to check a total of 700 inmates. There's no way we can do that. And the families know that we're understaffed. So they take their chances and hope they can manage to sneak something into the prison.
It's a dilemma. The state will not spend more money on its prisoners, and there aren't enough guards to control the situation. Georg has been in prison for 1 year.
Prison management only makes sure that it's warm here in the winter. For everything else, you're on your own. You have to bring your own fan and refrigerator. If you don't have any family to help you out, it's difficult to get through the month here.
Georg is in prison for the third time, on multiple burglary and theft convictions. He just can't seem to stop.
It's hard to explain. Imagine that you're sitting at a table totally overflowing with food. Of course, at some point, you're going to get hungry. Maybe you can keep away from the food for 24 hours or so, but at some point, you're going to want to take some.
Georg Avangyan is looking at 3 more years behind bars. Because he's always making trouble, he doesn't stand a chance of early release.
They found a cell phone on me. That's why I lost my job here at the prison. But I'm not giving up my phone just to try to get out earlier. No way. I'm just going to get another one. They're not going to release me any earlier no matter what I do. So I don't care.
Georg's stubbornness brings him into repeated conflict with the guards. The next confrontation is already brewing. Aram found him in possession of a knife, and it wasn't the first time.
How else am I supposed to do it? My parents also send me groceries like salad. How am I supposed to cut it without a knife?
You get your food in the prison. You don't have to cook, so you don't need a knife.
We're only talking about salad.
In Block 4, Georg is by now considered to be a real troublemaker. The other inmates don't like it. After his quarrel with a guard, some prisoners take him aside and have a talk with him. They're worried that they will also be more strictly controlled if he keeps causing trouble. Even if such conflicts are commonplace, Arman does not simply take them in stride.
These situations stress me out so much that I go home and yell at my wife for no reason. She'd be like, "Why are you yelling at me?" And I yell back, "I'm not yelling." It's absurd.
In Armenia, family plays a vital role. There is a long tradition of relatives taking care of the prisoners. Every day at the Armavir penitentiary, bags and packages pile up in the holding area. Each prisoner may have up to 70 kilos delivered per month. The relatives often come by in person. Today, Ariana Nahapetsyan has brought food for her brother-in-law.
Today, I brought pilaf, chicken, salad, bread, juice, cigarettes, sugar, tea, and coffee. Everything he asked for. My brother-in-law is used to home cooking, so we bring him things from the region where we live. This tastes much better than the prison slop, and the quality is a lot better, of course.
Twice a month, Ariana's family brings food worth 200 euros. That's equivalent to the average monthly wage in Armenia.
The food helps my brother-in-law and the other prisoners not to feel so alone while they're locked up in here. They realize we are thinking of them at home while we are cooking them dinner.
The deliveries are a way for Ariana's sister's husband to stay in touch with his family. Meanwhile, there's a lot of activity in the canteen kitchen. This is where the normal food is prepared. At Armavir, the prisoners cook for themselves. Even the head chef is an inmate.
Today, we're having bean soup with potatoes, with a side of rice.
The food in Armavir is strictly rationed. Each inmate gets 500 grams of main course and 200 grams of side dish per day. The inmates eat in their cells.
You want some?
What is it? Rice? I'll have some.
Many prisoners completely refuse to eat the bad prison food and try to survive only on what they can get themselves. For this reason, food inspection continues in full swing. Packages brought in by family members carry a significant security risk. Relatives often take advantage of the opportunity to smuggle contraband. Every day, Aman and his colleague Georg have to inspect an average of 500 kilograms worth of goods. They are mainly checking for alcohol and drugs that may be hidden in the food.
Sometimes we discover drugs that have been mixed into the food, but that usually reduces their effect. So they prefer to hide it well camouflaged, somewhere in the package.
An X-ray scanner helps the guards in their search.
Okay, now that looks suspicious. You can tell by the color. But it could also just be salt and pepper. Was I right? The color is gone. It's all good.
The deliveries are clean today, but smuggling remains a major problem for the prison. Besides drugs, cell phones are also a coveted commodity. The guards regularly seize dozens of them. Homemade weapons and tools are also popular with the prisoners.
This thing here was most certainly used as a lockpick.
This tool here was used by an inmate to scratch holes into the wall. That's where they hide the contraband, like smartphones, for example.
Prisoners and their families get very creative when it comes to smuggling.
We've had cases where we found drugs in melons or cell phones in cakes. And sad as it is, a few of our colleagues here are willing to smuggle in all kinds of things for money. It's one of our great weaknesses here, because it's very difficult to control.
And there is yet another weak point in the Armenian prison system. In the chaotic years following the collapse of the Soviet Union, several prisoners were sentenced to death. Later, their sentences were converted to life in prison. Whether or not they'll ever be free again is anyone's guess. In some instances, the records of the case no longer exist. It's a hopeless situation that often precipitates desperate acts. Escape attempts are therefore not uncommon. To get a handle on this problem, Commander Harutyan has put together a special team of investigators.
This bulletin board shows everyone serving a life sentence in Armavir. That's the group most likely to think about breaking out. Here on the blue bulletin board are all the inmates we've been warned about. Internal sources have told us that they have tried to break out before or are planning to. I have to admit that some of them are really smart about it. Like these two here, who were the last to make an attempt.
It was a spectacular escape attempt, and one that happened on Arman's and Aram's watch. The cell is now a lesson for the guards to better recognize signals in the future.
This is where two prisoners recently tried to break out. The investigation is currently underway, and we're trying to solve the mystery of how they managed to soar through the bars without anyone noticing.
What remains is an embarrassing memorial. The tools and other materials used for the escape attempt. Arman is still scratching his head.
Unfortunately, we have to admit that we simply didn't notice anything. They both behaved totally inconspicuously. We wouldn't have noticed anything until the end if we hadn't received a tip from an informant.
The almost escapees have been in solitary confinement ever since. Arsène is an inmate who also hangs on the pin board of potential escapees. That's because he's one of the lifers in Armavir. He's already spent half his life in prison.
The 4 square meters for each offender, you cannot say that it's sufficient space, because the life is here, only in this square. We are allowed for now to stay 2 people in the same room, not 4. If ever 4 people are here, we cannot study, for example.
As a member of a left-wing extremist terrorist group, Arsène was sentenced to death in 1996 for instigating a double murder. The sentences were converted to life in prison in 2003.
The first 7 years was a death sentence. We were death row. So half of us have died in the prison because the conditions were, I don't want to talk about it. We tried to change ourselves, our mentality and how we see the world and life. So we have decided to give a meaning to our life inside prison.
Arsène began to study psychology. He's the first Armenian prisoner to earn a university degree. Now he's working on his doctoral thesis on prison psychology. His own experiences as a lifer are quite useful. He is acutely aware of the hierarchies and structures in Armavir.
Controlling a prison is very easy for the because the authority of prisons is corrupted. If you are an offender and you want to change, be a better person, you must decide to be better than the policeman who is controlling you. So this decision is very, very difficult to take. Being better than the normal of Armenia, that kind of a correction is unthinkable.
According to the Corruption Index of Transparency International, Armenia ranks 107th, along with Ethiopia, Macedonia, and Vietnam. But there are also plenty of secret dealings going on at Armavir Penitentiary. But Arsène is still trying to use legal channels to petition the court for a pardon. Corruption is not the only problem, though. Like all prisons in the country, Armavir Penitentiary is fighting the problem of drug addiction. Heroin and crack are particularly widespread throughout the country, and many of the inmates are addicted when they get to prison. Prison authorities suspect that the thieves-in-law from Block 6 are trying to keep them that way. Since the understaffed guards cannot eliminate the problem of smuggling, they try to get the prisoners clean by means of a methadone program. Timur from Georgia is among those in the program.
I'm not strong enough to stop using drugs by myself. But the methadone helps to control my addiction.
the substitute drug begins to take effect 30 minutes after it is ingested. It lasts for about 4 hours. This way, the facility attempts to keep its drug-addicted inmates happy.
I'm sure if we suddenly stopped giving out methadone, there'd be riots immediately.
The program is also designed to curb the level of criminality in the prison.
The point of this replacement program is making sure we addicts no longer have to worry so much about where we can best get the drugs.
Here too, those responsible are counting on de-escalation. In Block 6, the prisoners are responsible for their own well-being. Here, the Armenian mafia lives by its own rules.
There are absolutely no problems in here. The people here are cool, completely normal. The prisoners are at harmony with each other. That's our Armenian mentality. We are authentic. It's not like in African or American prisons. We aren't brutal thugs. We are here in Armenia. We use our heads. We are always polite. We say, good morning, bon appetit, hello, how are you?
Mafia law forbids divulging information about internal affairs. Toward the outside world, everything is always relaxed. Before going to prison, Georg Avangyan was a professional boxer. The sport brought him all the way to France.
I have a lion tattoo and a fish tattoo here. Gangster and Jesus. That's just my style.
He won't say just what it was that got him off track. He still has 6 years to serve for attempted murder. For him, it was clear that only Block 6 would do.
This is my family here. My real family. It's like your family at home. The only difference is that we're trapped here.
Many of the inmates in Block 6 have a hard time even imagining life outside the prison walls. But the ex-boxer Amar, who still has a few more years of prison ahead of him, has concrete ideas about what his time after Armavir could look like.
This here is our home. Our Armenian home. I'd like to go back into professional boxing when I get out of here. I'm 35 years old. There's no professional boxing in Armenia. That's why I want to box in America or Europe.
It is this hope that keeps Amar upstanding while in prison. In Block 4, Commander Harutyunan and the guard Aman have an appointment with Georg, the rebellious prisoner. The interview and the argument with the guard made quite a stir. Georg fears that his fellow prisoners will take revenge on him, which is why he asked for a solitary cell.
Can you please leave? We need the room. If a prisoner asks to be transferred to another cell or another prison, we must first understand exactly what the problem is. Only after an interview do we decide whether we will grant the application. Hello, how are you doing?
All right.
Sit down. Why are you afraid and want to change cells?
I broke the rules. I talk too much to the prison officials. That's against the code.
Did you talk about specific people? Did you mention names?
I may have talked too much about the situation here and other things.
I understand.
Has the mafia gained influence over Block 4? There isn't usually any talk of a code.
There are no mafia members in your block, and there's no criminal code in force here. I really don't think the thieves in law control your block. Therefore, I see no reason why I should grant your request. Georg, I guarantee that I will make sure you are safe. I assure you, we have everything under control. We will talk to the other prisoners and help you work out the problem, but you need to return to your cell.
I don't know what you mean. I don't feel comfortable.
Think about it. I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. Take care of yourself. You can go now.
Okay, thank you.
Georg Avangyan can only hope that Commander Harutsyanan is right, and that his block is still free of the influence of organized criminals. Otherwise, he faces some uncertain times. The sisters Ariana and Marina Nahopetsyan are also aware of the violence that exists among the prisoners. Because they are worried about their imprisoned family member, they visit him twice a month. It's a burden for all involved.
We have to wait here for up to 8 hours. It's even worse on holidays. On days like these, we almost regret coming here. We've been here since 8 a.m. and have to wait until 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And we have the children with us. How are we supposed to be able to be on our feet here for all that time?
This also applies to her brother-in-law's case. He's in custody for drug possession, but nobody knows when the trial will start. Until then, he'll stay in prison. Only the prospect of seeing her husband and the family of her children gives Marina, Ariana's sister, and her family the wherewithal to wait. Finally, the time has come.
We're allowed to come here twice a month. Once you've survived the waiting, everything is fine again. Then we can decide how much time we want to spend with my husband. Even if it's exhausting every time, it's always worth it.
Marina and her children have come to know exactly how each visit will unfold. It's a very short, happy ending. In just a few hours, the visit will be over. Then, the waiting starts all over again. One of the other prisoners in Armavir Penitentiary is still hoping for his own happy ending. Arsène Astroni has been in prison for over 20 years. His daily walks in the yard and conversations with his cellmates were not a matter of course during his first years there.
For 3 or 4 hours every day, they allow us to get out. 8 years, I was only in a single cell. Never came out and to have a recreation and see the sky, even through the bars. Now, this sky is a very beautiful sky.
He is comforted by his only friend, Asher Monokyan. As a 19-year-old conscript, he shot 2 companions during a fight. In prison, the 2 started out as cell neighbors.
He asked me to teach him English, but we were in separate rooms then, in 2000. So I started teaching him using this small paper that you throw or hang, and he replied by doing his homework. For 2 years, for 2 or 3 years, we corresponded between rooms, teaching English and learning English with small papers. of cigarettes. So that changed him, I think. It changed me too, because I showed that I can help.
Even if Arsène Astroni seems to have been completely rehabilitated, his chances of ever living in freedom again are quite low. The murders he committed as a left-wing extremist in the 1990s are too serious. Georg Avangyan has dared to return to his old cell. He doesn't think he'll ever get back on the right track.
The chances of me ending up in jail again are about 50-50. The fact is, when I get out of here and look for a job, the employer will want to see my criminal record. So then everyone will know about my past, which is why I barely have a chance at honest work.
Boxer and mafia member Amar Wadanyan has his own opinion of prison structures.
Prison doesn't change people. A good person is still a good person, even if he doesn't get out for 10 years. You're the same person when you get out.
Arsène wants to continue to fight for his release in court.
I myself, as an individual, I don't believe in chance. I think that every decision that you make will lead you towards your destiny.
Marina Nahopetyan and her family hope that they will soon know when their husband and brother-in-law will finally be allowed to leave one of the country's toughest prisons. Until then, they will continue to visit him as often as possible. For the guards Arman Beglayan and Aram Hovanesyan, 6 p.m. is finally quitting time. They leave the prison walls behind them until the next shift change, physically at least.
We have to solve many problems all over the place throughout the entire day and do our work as well as we can. It's really not always that easy.
I'm very glad nothing bad happened today. But right now, I'm feeling totally exhausted. What I'd really like to be able to do is to leave my exhaustion behind. To leave it behind these prison walls. I'd love to go home to my family feeling fresh and not bring all these negative emotions with me.
The stress for both of them won't stop that soon. Not as long as the Armavir Penitentiary hasn't won the struggle against the influence of the thieves in law.